Hello, Kate Chassé.
Hello,
Great,
Mike.
great to have you. I found you on the Jeff Mara podcast, talking about aliens and UAPs and UFO sightings and things like that, which has always been a very interesting topic to me and something I've always looked into and followed. Um, but I've never found proof, obviously. And I've never found anything super convincing to me, but I'm very open. And I was actually born in um, New Mexico, where the aliens supposedly landed. That's where I was born, Roswell, New Mexico.
You were born in Roswell?
Born in Roswell, yeah.
No
Isn't
way.
that funny?
That is
I
amazing.
know. Yeah, my parents had a restaurant there called Taco Box, and they it was, I guess it was like an oilish town or something, and or something, some kind of town, and that they stopped producing whatever they produced, and so the town kind of died, and they ended up having to move, and then we moved to Redding, California from there. And I was only 2 years old when we moved, so I don't remember Roswell,
Oh, okay.
but I've always wanted to go back. I've never been back, so that's on my bucket list to go back and see where I was born. And I've heard it's all like alien, decked out in alien stuff and all that. Have you been?
Apparently, I
Yeah.
haven't been, but I've heard about the UFO Fest, I think
Yeah.
they call it, the Roswell UFO Fest, and so I'd love to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Seems
It'd
like
be
it was fun.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then you're in Canada,
I'm in
uh,
Canada, Toronto.
Toronto, yeah. So I guess let's get down to it. Are aliens real?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. I so well, to be fair, I've never actually seen an alien. Like
Right.
I saw a light being, but is that an extraterrestrial? I don't know.
Right.
Uh, so that's like you know, it's a little bit ambiguous there.
Yeah.
But I have seen craft in the sky, and I've seen it close, and I've seen it very clear, and it didn't have any of the observables, meaning like, or it's sorry, it did have the some of the observables, instantaneous acceleration, or in this case, it just disappeared and then reappeared. Um, no sound, that kind of stuff. So for me, the phenomenon, whatever it is real. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, I've seen too many things now to not absolutely believe that there's something here.
Yeah. And how old were you when you saw this?
The first one, it was in 92, so what was I, 29?
29, yeah. And you've
Yeah.
seen a few over the years. You've had a few experiences.
Yeah, I've seen about eight different type of craft. The type that I loosely call orbs, I mean, they appear as just extremely bright stars in the sky. I've seen those in three different instances. The other crafts are much more sort of like that nuts and bolts, concrete, solid objects, and usually very close up.
Now, where were you when you saw these? Are you looking for these, or are you just like happen to be walking and look up and see them, or is it a combination?
Yeah, the first one I was walking. I
Yeah.
was out with a couple of what my roommate and his best friend, and it was about 11 o'clock at night in Ottawa, uh, the capital of Canada, and it was winter, November. There was snow on the ground, and there was what they call a low ceiling, so visibility was really good. And this craft, I just noticed it in the sky. It was about I don't know, about 500 feet up and about 500 feet away, give or take, of course. Um, and it was huge. It was like the size of two 747s. Because I describe it like that just to give you a sense of the mass of it. It was huge, and there was absolutely no sound, and it was the shape of a football, and um, it was metallic, sort of dark silver metallic color, and it had lights about a foot and a half in diameter, sort of going around the center of it, all around the football, the center of the football, and in a pattern, red, yellow, green, blue, going all the way around. And then it just disappeared and reappeared. So this was in the eastern sky. It reappeared in the western sky at the pretty much the same location, just opposite. Then disappeared from there and reappeared in the eastern sky, and then just disappeared.
So was it like you could see it move that fast, or it did literally disappeared and it reappeared?
It just disappeared and reappeared. So
So,
whether it was moving so fast that the eye couldn't track it,
yeah,
possibly, but it to me it looked like it disappeared
yeah.
and then it reappeared, then disappeared and reappeared.
Almost like a wormhole or like a bending of, when you
Yeah,
get like time, like, Einstein's theory of relativity and like light, and if you can move as fast as light, time stands still, like the relationship between light and time. And if you can move faster than light, maybe you can go back in time. I don't know it really well. Um,
yeah.
but I do know like our galaxies are, a lot of people don't understand how far apart our stars and our galaxies and how many stars and how many galaxies there are.
Hmm.
Um, and what a light year is. Light year is the amount of space you can travel at the speed of light in a
Yeah,
year,
yeah.
right? So I remember this from physics class. The speed of light is 186,282. I believe it's kilometers per mile,
Yeah,
per second, not per hour, per minute,
yeah, yeah.
second.
Wild.
Insane. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the problem is we've never been able to get anywhere near the speed of light to test that theory and to see what that would do to the fabric of time and space and the way we experience time, right? Like
Hmm.
into dimensions. Like we are, you think about a dot on a paper, that's one dimension, and a line is two dimensions. Three dimension is like a cube. And they say the fourth dimension is um,
Time.
time, right? Movement of time through space.
Hmm.
And we only experience time in one direction. We only experience time going forward. But say you or a fifth dimension being that, much like if you had a two-dimensional being, they couldn't comprehend how we would interact in a three-dimensional space.
Hmm.
Who's to say there's not four-dimensional beings that we just can't comprehend that can move through time um,
Right, right.
that way or through technology with um, you know, faster than the speed of light or wormhole type stuff and all
Hmm.
that stuff. It gets really
Hyperspace.
complicated when you get into like the physics of it
Hmm.
and like how there are technically like possibilities. We just are so far away from ever uh, doing those things. And then like I think on average in our galaxy, stars are 5 light years away from each other. So it takes us traveling at the speed of light for 5 years to get to the
Hmm.
next star.
Hmm.
And then we're in the Milky Way galaxy. There's hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy, and there's hundreds of billions of galaxies in the universe. So let's see, I looked up some numbers here. Um, yeah, there's roughly 200 billion trillion stars so in the universe. So that's let's see,
Insane.
there's more stars than there are grains of sand in all the beaches of the earth. And it's
Yeah,
not even close. It's like there's like 10,000 times the amount. So it's just
yeah.
an unfathomable number that they think
Hmm.
of stars there are. And
Hmm.
our one star has nine planets, and one of them has life. Not only life, but life that's become as complex as we are.
Hmm.
That's why I always have a hard time saying we're alone out there because we have measured almost none of we just don't have the equipment. It's like an ant here, like what do they know about it? West Africa, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
just don't have any ability to sense it, know it, learn about it. Like it's just too advanced for them. And so I always wonder if it's something like that. We were not as advanced as to be able to even comprehend that. Uh,
Yeah. And I mean that's always been the scientists sort of uh dispute about the ability of an extraterrestrial to come here is that
mhm.
ability to traverse those long distances.
Mhm.
But there's a possibility that, a there's you can get around that speed of light barrier,
Right.
and like you say, wormholes, hyperspace, that kind of stuff. Or that they're not that far at all. Maybe they've been here all along. Some
Yeah.
people believe that they've been here all along. So,
Yeah.
or maybe it's a combination of a few things.
Yeah, and a lot of the or like one of the more interesting things I've heard is like, well, we don't know much about our ocean. We haven't mapped very much of that. So it's possible there could
Yep.
be something there. And a lot of sightings come from over the ocean. A lot of the
And
pilot,
and
talk
over lakes. Yep.
over lakes. Yeah. So that's always interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've always been a skeptic, but God, I want to believe, I want to believe that that's true or like that
Yeah.
we're out there. But I just haven't been fully convinced yet. But I'm totally open to the possibility. So tell me more about this sighting. So after that happened, that was it. And were you the only one that saw that, or you were with your friends? Did they see it?
Yeah. My roommate saw it, and the
Yes.
other guy missed the whole thing and was mad at us for not
Uh,
sort of pointing it out to him, but it happened so quickly
yeah. How
that,
fast, like how quickly did you see it and before it left?
yeah, probably under a minute.
Yeah.
And because you're like, what,
Yeah.
like you're not really comprehending what you're seeing,
Yeah.
and then it takes your mind a moment to process it, and then part of my mind was just kind of shutting it down. And then my roommate said to me, my God, did you just see that? And I'm like, oh, you saw that? That was real? Like I didn't even believe it was real,
Yeah.
that it's so outside of reality at that time, especially in 92, that kind of blows your mind. And I think just that reaction alone, the fact that I had a hard time believing it, was kind of proof to me that this was something anomalous. This isn't normal uh technology, or else we would have been like, oh well, whatever, but it's not normal technology, so it has an effect on you. And and so that I knew right then and there that I had seen something that wasn't ours, that wasn't made by human hands,
Hmm.
you know um
Yeah.
so
So were you right away? Like you knew that, or did it take a while to kind of like dissect that and like admit that to yourself? And then at the same time, like, what do you do with that knowledge once you have it, once you are convinced? Because obviously people are going to think you're crazy. People
yeah,
are,
and they did. Yeah.
yeah.
um
And so
yeah,
admit
no, I
you did, you don't want to tell. It's like they always say, if Jesus ever came back, we never know because anybody that said they were Jesus, we wouldn't believe.
exactly.
They're a crazy person.
Exactly. Well,
So,
they'd have to offer proof, right?
yeah, and that's the thing.
And that I've been offered that proof. You haven't, so I don't expect, it's not, you shouldn't believe, like it should be, proof needs to be offered,
Yeah.
you know. Uh, I've seen the proof with my eyes, and I knew pretty much right away what I had seen. But then I also went through well, okay, what else could it have been? And my roommate and I really eliminated everything. Um, and then I told my stepdad about it, and he used to work monitoring the Russians at a base called Canadian Forces Station Alert. So it's the furthest most north in Canada, in North America, basically. And that was for NORAD. And they would spend 6 months up there, basically smoking, drinking, and playing cards, but also monitoring the Russians. What else do a
What's
bunch of
NORAD?
guys do? What's that?
What's NORAD?
NORAD.
Or like what describe kind of what it is? I don't know.
Yeah, I forget what it stands for, but it's an alliance, I believe, between the United States and Canada. Um, and it's basically to protect North American airspace.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
So he's watching the airspace.
yeah, watching the airspace, you mostly on radar,
Oh,
and they would pick up, you know, air traffic, including commercial air traffic and occasionally incursions from the Russians
Mm.
uh, coming into North American airspace. And then occasionally they'd get these bogeys, what he called bogeys. So when I told him the story of what I had seen, he's like, "Oh yeah, for sure. Uh, I know for sure they're real."
Oh,
So
wow. Unbelievable.
I was very encouraged by that. The other thing he used to do, which just got me thinking, I started just thinking about this a few days ago, but I knew he had been doing this. So when he left the military, the Canadian military, he started working for the Department of Communications, and he was an inspector. And back then it was ham radios, and they were causing interference, people's televisions, and so on. So he would go around inspecting people's televisions and fixing them so that they would have proper, you know, what do they call it? Um,
Reception.
yeah, yeah, like I forget,
Mhm.
like yeah, reception. Um, and he would also be involved in any type of aircraft recovery. So he was an expert, I guess, on the black box. And so he would, for the province of Ontario, I believe it was, but it might have been all of Canada. So whenever a plane went down, he would go and help them find the black box, which made me wonder if he at the time, he's dead now, but at the time, would he have been involved in craft retrieval? Because it's suspected that countries around the world have had crashes like Roswell, where the crashes and or landings that were abandoned and so on, that these craft might be intact, or there'd be pieces of it that they could analyze and learn from. And some even suspect there might have been beings of some sort. So I started thinking, well, maybe he might have been involved in some sort of crash retrieval type program. Who knows?
Mm.
But for sure, he I know for a fact he did the radar. He didn't talk much about his work, but he did say when I had that sighting that for sure he believed, and all his colleagues believed, that there were something visiting our planet,
Mm.
something not made by us.
That's interesting. So,
Mhm.
just to go back, NORAD is the North American Aerospace Defense Command. So,
There we go. Yeah.
yeah, it's a joint organization between U.S. and Canada that protects North America from aerospace and maritime threats.
Yeah.
So he's monitoring it for defense.
Yeah.
And then the black box is, for those that don't know, when an airplane crashes, a black box is meant to survive that crash, and it records everything that happened in the cockpit. I guess in the cockpit.
Yeah, and it sends out a ping as well. I think you can locate the plane
Okay.
through this black box. It's got some sort of device in it to for it to be located. Now it's probably a GPS and all that kind of stuff, but back then I don't know what it was.
And then, what's your education background? Aren't you, can you speak on that a little bit?
Sure, sure. So I have an undergrad degree in basically a major in history and a minor in politics and philosophy, and then I got a master's degree in information studies. And from that, I worked as a librarian for about 20 years.
Yeah, so you definitely are no stranger to academics.
Hmm. Hmm.
Just some random person.
I was, so I got my degree, my master's degree when I was 41, but I had gone back as a mature student in my 30s. And because of my sighting, I actually took three courses in astronomy
Hmm.
just to have an understanding of, because at the time I thought this was, extraterrestrial. Now I don't know. Is it, time travelers? Is it someone, what do they call them? When they're from here, and then the ETs or that sort of thing. Uh, I forget what they call them when they suspect they're from here. Crypto terrestrials, I think it is.
Oh, I haven't heard that. Interesting.
Yeah, there's all this terminology, which is important, but sometimes I forget it. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I wanted to understand the universe a bit more, and so it's great. It gave me a good foundation for understanding astronomy and so on. And like you say, the vastness of the universe and the fact that there might be multiple universes for all we know. So that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Um, Now tell me, what do you think about like, so do you, so a lot of things, it's kind of like, my channel's a lot on addiction stuff, and I went to AA, and there's a lot of people that hate AA, and they have a certain concept of what it is and what the people are like. And yeah, those people can be there, but that's not everybody. There's a lot of people don't understand. There's lots of different types of people, and it's oftentimes the loudest ones are the ones that we can't stand either, you know. Same with like churches. There's a lot of people that are great people that go to church, and they're loving and they don't hate and all these things, but then the ones we see on TV are, the fire and brimstone, or you get all these bad reputations. And I've seen a lot of that with the alien and extraterrestrial community too. There's a lot of um, people that seem to be taking advantage, or like they just, a lot of the things they say don't really make sense. They're unable to even like admit that maybe they're wrong, or maybe they saw something else, you know. How do you feel about that? Do you see that too, or do you?
Oh, sure. I mean the there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of make a lot of claims, and I'm sure not all of them are legit, right?
Yeah.
Um, I I think anyone who claims to have an absolute authority on what's going on, or is in direct contact with aliens and speaks for aliens, I'm more skeptical. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that isn't happening. I again haven't experienced that myself, so um, you know, I haven't had direct conversations. I've had sort of I had a sort of an encounter of a telepathic nature, but it's not a conversation. Um, I mean, I think that would be cool. And I'm not saying those people aren't having those conversations. It's just for sure that's harder to believe. Um, and and who are they really talking to as well? I mean, I think you need to have a bit of discernment out there, like you don't talk to strangers kind of thing. You don't get into strange cars. So like if something landed in front of my house, I live in a condo, but in front of our building, I wouldn't go running out,
Oh
You
yeah.
don't know who these people are, right? You don't
Yeah.
get into strange cars and run up to strangers. I think you take your time and get to know them and make sure that they're decent, right? Like they're good people, even if they're not human, whatever, that they're good people.
Yeah, and that is one thing that, like, if these are extraterrestrial beings, and they are real, then it brings in a lot of questions about safety and what do they want? Why are they
Mm,
here? Are
yeah.
they dangerous? Are they going to be helpful? Do they look at us like ants, where we don't go out and exterminate all the ant colonies because they're just part of the ecosystem, but we don't necessarily give them a second thought either. We're not going to, we just kind of study them a little bit. Is it like that? Um, yeah, and those are all things, the fact that we haven't been destroyed is a good sign, I guess. But yeah, there's so many possibilities there. You said you had a telepathic encounter. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I didn't talk about that in that other the other Jeff Mara podcast, but because it's not something to me that's like that nuts and bolts, not concrete.
Right.
There was no physical aspect to it. It happened, uh, I was it was early morning, um, and I had just woken up, but I was awake. I was definitely awake, and I actually sat up in bed, and then it's the strangest thing. It's like I could sense someone, a human being standing beside me, but I couldn't see them. And I was no longer sitting in my room on my bed. I was standing in this just sort of empty open space. Um, it looked like an indoor open space, and there was somebody beside me, but they were just behind me slightly, but I could sense them and you know and sort of hear them, and it sort of just that they were there. And then it's like this person was there to introduce me to this entity. And so this is all happens really quickly. And I I sort of get the idea that I'm supposed to meet this entity. And like I'm awake at this point, and I can feel the entity's like presence. It's hard to describe. It was like I can't even describe it. It was like a very powerful mind. Like I almost described it as almost like an AI, and it was huge. Like it just felt like this massive, powerful mind, and I could sense it there just outside of my consciousness, and it was looking at me. I could feel its consciousness looking at me, and it was immense. And it didn't actually, I could sense that it was also not moving to sort of have a telepathic contact. I think it could sense my fear. I was like, this is huge and powerful. And I was, it's terrifying. And so I just kind of like, whoa, and sort of just like consciously moved back, and it pulled away too, and just receded. It's a very subtle thing, and I don't expect anybody to believe it. It's one of those things that I experienced it. It was it felt, afterwards it was like, that's just crazy, like a lot of the stuff. Yeah, it did happen. It did feel like it felt real, and it felt really, like I said before, this thing was immense, and it had it didn't have, I didn't get the sense of it wasn't mean. Yeah, I can't say that word. I trip over it all the time. Uh, and I didn't get the sense that a strong friendliness either. It was very neutral, almost like I said, like almost like an AI, like a massive intelligence, but I didn't get a lot of empathy, but I didn't get a lot of fear or anger from it, or anything. It was very neutral.
Interesting. How was that when you were younger too, or is that more
Oh,
recent?
that's recently. Yeah, that happened about a year ago.
How old, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you now?
61.
61. Okay, so it happened a
Yeah.
year ago, so pretty recently.
Yeah, yeah, about a year and a half ago. Yeah.
And you have you there's so much information out there on aliens and UAPs and all that. Have you found any information on what that could have possibly been, or like have other people experienced something like that that you know of? Or is it kind
Yeah,
of
I mean, I've heard of variations of that. I've just never heard anyone talk about, at least that I'm aware of this type of sort of interaction. Usually, what I hear is like there is a telepathic exchange.
yeah.
This felt like this entity was checking me out. You
Mm,
know, like yeah, and I was being introduced. There was somebody else there, and that was it felt human. And so I don't know in what state that is. This some sort of astral state? Um, and yeah, I don't recall anyone ever talking about that. And like the fact that it felt like an AI. It felt like its intelligence was vast.
mm,
And I don't know how I know that. It was just, its presence was massive and terrifying, but not because it was, emanating any sort of emotion. It's just it's terrifying because it's so unknown,
mm.
and it was so immense.
Wow. Yeah, that's the first I've heard of that. Because like you said, I usually hear like a communication.
Hmm.
Um, Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The unknown and the super intelligence, that's kind of a frontier that's been talked about a lot lately. Uh, Pretty
It
interesting.
was afterwards, it was, I mean, it's super cool. like I was like, that was super cool experience, even though it was really terrifying. It was cool as well. Like I was like, like that was really interesting. What the hell was that? I don't know, but it was interesting.
And so when you came back out of that, were you just back in bed?
No, I was just, and I just sort of uh was just back right back into my body sitting on the bed.
Mm,
So who knows? Maybe I had fallen asleep again and that was just a dream. I can't I can't vouch for the experience. I have no way to prove it, uh, to measure it or anything like that.
yeah,
But just to say that that happened.
yeah,
And for me, it was fascinating. I found
yeah,
it very fascinating.
yeah. Yeah, it's I always think it's just so interesting how short of a time we have to experience the world. Say you live 100 years, which is generous.
Yeah.
How long, like how small of a time frame we get to experience what's out here,
Yeah.
it's so interesting to me. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, there's you know, just hundreds of thousands, millions of years that they think time has been around,
Hmm.
and I think one of the best, arguments for all these like things that are it's just crazy things out there that we can't explain to me is that we are here, that we're talking on a logic on a webcam in
Hmm.
two different countries. I mean,
Yeah.
that alone is so weird.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this is I think a lot of like I remember Independence Day, the movie Independence Day, like Welcome to Earth, and like they're fighting the aliens, and
Yeah.
the government didn't want to tell people because they're scared of mass panic and things like that. Um, I guess and like mass, I remember they said like there'd be mass religious panic, but to
Hmm.
me, I don't know that it does. I don't know if it strengthens my resolve for like a God, say, or like I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it takes away from, I almost hate to say a religion because that's more of a man thing, but like the concept of of God or a higher power. Do you
Hmm.
think it adds to that or takes away, or do you think it's just,
I, I I don't think it takes away.
yeah, I don't think so.
Um, I don't think I think we're dealing with uh a lot of different things here. So you've got the human race.
Mhm.
You may have those crypto terrestrials that have been here a long time. You may have time travelers from our future, from other futures, and you may have extraterrestrials, but I also, and multidimensionals. And I have a whole other category I call celestials. I mean, there could be, and the celestials are like, the angels and so on. That could be part of it as well. It could be all of the above. Um, and there's just different levels of existence, and not levels as far as one's better than the other, just like phases of existence or planes of existence. And we're on the physical plane, and there are people out there who can control time and space. There are people that can maybe travel multidimensionally. So, like, and maybe through to different other multiverses or so on. That could be a possibility. And then I think there could possibly be though the characters from the Bible that we read about, the angels and God and all of that. That could still be a possibility. Um, so I'm for me, it hasn't affected my ability to believe in some sort of higher being of some sort and some sort of higher meaning to life. I'm not willing, I will not I've refused to become like, I will not be an atheist because, and I've actually went down that road and it's horrible. It's not a great place to be. I refuse to accept that this is a random universe with no meaning in it. And so, so I just, that's, if it turns out, when I die and there's nothing on the other side, so be it. In the meantime, that thought has made me happy, and it made me, it's comforted me.
Yeah, me too. I'm
Yeah.
glad you say that because so many people are one side or the other, and so many people don't think like because I'm pretty skeptical. I'm very science oriented, but I'm also like you said, I've gone down the atheist route, and I found it to be um childish.
Mm.
It's like there's have you heard of Pascal's wager? He's
No,
a
I haven't.
he's a French mathematician, and he was the best mathematician in France, I believe, along I don't know what years, but the king hired him to answer the question, "Is there a God?" If see if he could do it mathematically.
Right.
And he came back to the king and he said the answer is the problem is you're asking the wrong question. It's not that is there a God or isn't there? It's should I believe in God? Because what are you risking? What are
Hmm.
you wagering? You're wagering not only so say the Bible's real and hell's real and heaven's real, you're wagering your soul for eternity that's going to burn in hell if you don't believe, or forever happiness with all your family. So right there, it's much wiser to bet on God. But then also you're it's also about the time we have if we're wrong. Like if we are wrong and you don't believe, by the time you know you're right, you're never going to know you're right because you just die and nothing happens. And it's like
Yeah.
before you were born. You
Yeah.
don't before you're born. It'd be like that.
Yeah.
Um, but and you can spend your life chasing facts. But what I found is facts are not very comforting when life gets hard and when you're trying to explain to your kid, what's going through the world or your nephews or like have a belief system. Um, and so it's almost like whether you believe or not, just it's almost more. I don't even want to say like it's right. It's just like it's just a better. It seems to be a better way to live to have not necessarily like the Bible belief, but some kind of belief in a higher thing because it feels like a father. It feels like there's somebody looking out for you. You're kind of being taken care of. It's a happy thought. It brings me joy. It brings me connection to others and connection to maybe the wondrous, the things that
Hmm.
we don't know.
Hmm.
And to me, it's a much more happy way of life compared to when I was, trying to prove God wrong and trying to prove Christians wrong and things like that.
Mm.
Um, and it's funny too because I go to church every once in a while, and it's not because like I have friends and family that are like still pretty atheist and against church and have misconceptions about it. And but for me, it's not that I go like I love going. It's fun. It's like singing. I like to sing. I like the motivational speech, but I don't believe everything they say. Like
Yeah.
I'm an adult. I can understand. Like I can make it
Yeah.
work for me, and I can have a healthy skepticism and take what I need and what I don't. And I'm not being brainwashed. It's like if you don't believe, it's almost then why don't you go to church? Because if you don't believe, then you have nothing to worry about. You can just enjoy it for what it is as a motivational speech,
Yeah.
and obviously all churches are different. Some are hard to be in because they're saying crazy stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just I'm very open to lots of things, and I'm very, especially now that I've gone through what I've gone through. I'm very in touch with what I like. It's kind of cliche, but saying my truth, and saying what not being attached to one outcome, but knowing in my heart and like in my body, I can feel it when I'm living a lie. I can feel it when I'm not being genuine, when I'm not being authentic to what I actually believe or curious about what I'm curious or,
Hmm.
um, and when I say those things, I can feel in my body relief, and like when I'm doing these interviews, I feel relief. It's like, oh, I'm meant to do this.
Hmm.
There's something in us that, whether that's God or just our evolutionary nature, um, that pulls us towards what is good for us. I feel like, and so I
Hmm.
think I think it's interesting that you've come out with these stories so late in life, and I'm wondering if you have some of that too, where it's like, I'm getting older. Like, who cares if people believe me or not anymore? Like, this is what happened. Like this, I don't know if it happened. Like, I don't know if it what it is or this or
Hmm.
that, but this is what I experienced, and that's all I can offer. But I'm not
Yeah.
going to lie and say I didn't experience it either, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
When I first had that first sighting, I told people, and you know, back in 92 wasn't a thing to do. Um, a lot of people kind of thought, oh boy, here we go. Like she's a little crazy. Eh, and I actually stopped telling people about it. And there were things that I didn't speak about until like a couple of years ago in 2021. And so yeah, like I kind of shut that down, shut it all down, became an atheist at one point even. And it didn't bring me any happiness, that's for sure. And it's a part of yourself. It's who I am. And as I started getting back into, ufology and following it back in 2019, or was it 2019, 2018? Um, you know, it it started to feel good to open up a little bit. I started telling friends about it again, and like new friends, and they were surprisingly open. And so that went well. I didn't tell everybody right away. Some friends were less uh, receptive than others, of course. I have a couple of friends who are atheists, and for some reason, atheism seems to also, it's like, even though these beings are physical beings, like they these people couldn't accept that part either. But both of them have kind of come around a little bit. They're willing to listen now a little bit. So that's progress. Um, I think my dad still, he's like, yeah, he can't, he can't, he doesn't believe. So I don't know what he thinks I'm seeing, if I'm just, misinformed and misidentifying things. I think he believes me that I believe I saw something, but I don't know if he believes that I've seen something out there, and that's fine. I don't need them to. I don't need people to believe me.
Yeah. Sometimes the parents are the hardest ones to
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
Yeah, that's what's so interesting about you and why I contacted you is because you have a very self-awareness. You have this self-awareness that I see a lot of people that have encounters or things that they don't necessarily bring up or have maybe, but
right.
yeah, I've noticed that you are very self-aware and aware of how this may came off and aware of people may believe that I believe that I saw this, that's a classic example. Like
Yeah,
that's one thing too, is I've said that before. I believe that person believes, but I don't know that that's true.
yeah, and I mean, that's fair. I don't know how much I would believe if I hadn't seen something
Mhm.
or experienced the things I've experienced. I mean, starting from when I was 6, right? So that started it off very early on. Um, and even like the dream or memory I had of manifesting a bowl of grapes, which I described in the Jeff Mara podcast. I mean, even if that was just a dream, it's still magical. And so I think as a kid, I believed in magic, like uh, back when I was growing up, things like I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched were on TV. And then later, the Star Trek uh, characters like Q and so on, those characters were, I mean, these characters are manifesting things. And that's something I did remember doing, or at least having a dream of. For me, it was a memory, but could very well have been a dream. But that stuck with me, that concept of being able to manifest something. So, I'm interested in exploring that side of things myself. Um, of course, interested in any sort of contact if these whoever's visiting us are, you know, kind and good people, like as you say, so yeah.
The other people that you had these contact, like I think you said the first contact was with a friend. You were walking with a friend, and they saw it too. How have they um how has their experience been over the years? Have they?
So my friend, I won't mention his name just in case he would rather not, but he he was always like, well, it's possible that was something of ours, and he really wasn't fully convinced. He couldn't figure out what it was, but he wasn't ruling out that was something of ours, which is fair, I guess. As the years have gone by, I think more and more he now refers to it as something, yeah, that was pretty weird. That was pretty strange. I don't think that was from here, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out his son is really into UFOs, like obsessed about them. I think, I don't know, he's about 11 or 12 years old, I think. And he's complete, and he wants to talk about them all the time. He wants to watch UFO uh documentaries. I've sent him a bunch that he didn't know about, and so his son is kind of pulling him into this world, you know, him kicking and screaming almost. But yeah,
That's funny.
yeah.
Is there anything you want to talk about?
Oh, I don't know. I don't have anything specific. I this has been a great conversation. I love talking about this topic. It's
Yeah, I
it's
do.
fascinating.
Yeah.
I I guess something you mentioned earlier, like when I first saw that first craft, all my thoughts were like where yours went. Like, well, wait a minute, who are these people? What are they doing here? What do they want? And my imagination, of course, took over, and from all kinds of possibilities, from they're here to help us to, we're a food crop for them or something, of some sort, and everything in between. So it's I guess I've kind of landed on so far I'm at, like you say, they haven't wiped us out, but maybe they're preserving us for, they need the real estate. And you don't, if you want to buy, if you're like Trump and you want to buy Greenland, you want it intact. You don't want it, you know, burnt to the ground and nothing living on it. You want it intact with all the people intact and carrying on as usual. There's no point in buying Greenland unless you can use it and have its resources, and maybe those resources are people as well as animals and minerals, etc. So it's not clear to me that there isn't an ulterior motive other than benevolence. Um, and so that's what I'd like to know. I'd like to know who these people are that I've been seeing for, hearing about and seeing, and have seen and known about them for 30 odd years. And I want to know what they're doing here, who they are, where they're from, what do they want, all of those questions. And I can't let it go. I tried to, you know, tried to move on with my life and let it all go, but I can't. It's, you know, I have I have to understand, and perhaps that's the reason for the visitations, like the for the phenomena. It's to get us to try to figure it out
Yeah.
because it propels your mind in a certain direction. It
That
opens your mind up, right?
really does. Yeah. And it makes me, it's funny. My sister lives where there's not a lot of ambient light. And so you can see a lot of times if there's a clear sky, you can see the whole Milky Way from her house, from her front.
Wow.
It's incredible. And I live
Wow.
outside San Francisco now, and I never see it. And it made one thing that struck me is because I grew up in a small town where you could see it every once in a while, you know? And what it was interesting to me is almost everybody that's lived here their whole life have never seen it. They don't realize they think there's just a few stars. Like they've never seen the Milky Way. Like
Yeah.
thing you see it. You
Yeah.
see thousands and thousands of stars.
Yeah.
And you see the swirl and you see the dust, and it's just
It's
absolutely
amazing. Yeah.
like it'll take your breath away.
Yeah.
And every time I go to her house, and a lot of times I go there at night, and I look up and I see it, I always just stand there before I walk in for a little while and look at it. And I always feel it helps me get out of and I just feel so much smaller. And
Hmm.
all my problems and all my I just get so intense into my own life. And then it just like goes, oh yeah, there's a bigger picture here. And we are ants, in the grand scheme of things. And how small we are compared to the universe and how little we know, things like that.
And how much have we been lied to? How
Yeah,
much of our history is missing? Um, the sticking to uh, you know, sticking to the standard storyline that they've been dishing out forever is not working anymore. We need to know. We need to know our history. We need to, how did we become human? Because that just didn't happen. Not not in the way they're saying it happened. That's for sure. I don't think. There's too many odd things about humans. How did, I mean, we made a lot of leaps really quickly. Maybe that's possible, but I tend to think that there might have been some tampering with way back. And maybe it could just have been just simple interbreeding. Not even any sort of genetic kind of thing, just, you know, some sort of interbreeding that might have happened. There might have been other civilizations here. I mean, possibly from Mars. Maybe we are maybe we are survivors from a Martian Holocaust, and we had to get off planet and we came here, lost our technology, lost our memory, lost our knowledge, and I don't know, possibly not. But anyways, the possibilities are endless, and I don't think until the governments start being honest with us, so that the universities and the scientists can start getting more to the bottom of our history. I think we need to know our history, and we need to know what's been going on, possibly since Roswell, possibly soon earlier than that. And I don't think we're going to advance much more until we do. In fact, it almost feels like we're devolving a little bit.
yeah. It's funny. My dad passed away when I was 30, and one thing that really struck me that I'd never heard people really talk about is the amount of knowledge I lost because I didn't realize how much, like everything he knew is just gone. And it was just instant. And so now, like he knew how to do certain things, and I would have learned those if I would have asked, but I never asked, and then they were just gone. So now the possibility of me learning what he knew is gone.
Yeah.
And that's always interested in me and the evolution of humans and like when especially when major things happen, like how you can lose vast amounts of knowledge, especially if vast amounts of people die, you know. Um, yeah, it's very interesting how not all knowledge has been like survived,
Hmm.
you know.
I mean, there was the Great Fire of the what's it called? The Library of Alexandria Library, I think it's
Oh
called. An ancient library that got burned to the ground, and so all that ancient not knowledge was lost.
yeah,
And how much was lost during the floods, which seemed to be all over the world, or at least it was a big event that happened a long time ago, 10, 12,000 years ago that affected the entire most of the earth. And you know,
yeah,
there might have been a lot of knowledge back then. There might have been another civilization. I'm not saying I believe all of these things, but
right,
we don't know. And
yeah,
it's not the fact that you can't even talk about it and can't even have an alternate view of how the pyramids were built. That's not right. We need to accept alternate theories and then go test them out. But we
yeah.
have to have the freedom to do that.
Yeah, that's one thing that bothers me on both sides of the spectrum is that people just get so emotional and you can't even ask questions that
Yeah.
it's just like, dude, I'm just asking the question or I'm just proposing a possibility. I'm not saying I believe this. I'm not
Yeah.
saying what if or maybe
Yeah.
this. Um, and like one of those for me was like you said, like, you know, with the Bible, maybe a lot of these stories aren't true or not true. Maybe they were inspired by events that had been passed down, like a major flood, you know, or things like that, and their stories to teach us lessons that have been learned over lifetimes, and things like that. Like maybe that's kind of where that originated, and
Hmm.
tends to be more my belief around that is more um, like a book of like oral traditions and oral lessons turning into more of a written one, and
Hmm.
it's like the commandments they do you know align pretty well with if you break certain ones, you're going to have consequences, whether you believe in God or not. It's just human consequences, right? If I
Yeah.
steal from somebody, forget about God, say there's no God, and we know that, even then, it's still a good idea not to steal from people because it
Right.
hurts your relationships. They're going to retaliate, things like that. Um, so yeah, the loss of information, and I think people forget, especially like younger people that have had it. I kind of was blessed and cursed with when I grew up with the internet because I remember not having it as a kid, but then
Hmm.
when I was about 15, 14, maybe 12 to 15, I guess, is when we first got AOL. And so I had this childhood without it that I still remember. And then the amount, like I remember if I didn't know something, I had to ask my parents. But if they didn't know it,
Yeah.
well, then what? Like
Yeah.
if you didn't know anybody that knew the answer, you just didn't know it. And there was no way to figure it out until you found somebody that knew it. The jump we've had in the transfer of information and the ability of information is, to me, I think when we go out and like look at human history on a timeline from way in the future, those jumps that we're talking about, those where humanity makes these leaps, that could possibly be one because there's such this just interesting total change in how accessible information is and how we are becoming more of like I am able to see what people in China are like, and I'm able to see and I almost kind of think like becoming more like obviously there's growing pains and we have our wars and we have our things, but my hope is that we're becoming more and more that we're seeing that we're all one and that we'll hopefully eventually act more like a school of fish than rather, um,
Hmm. Sharks.
yeah, than rather than sharks. Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
mean, that's what our world encourages, sharks, right?
yeah, it's I have hope though, because I've changed. I've changed. When I was younger, I was more of a shark, and I'm way more. I had a massive mushroom trip where I just saw we're all related, and I just feel like this is much better way of living, and I just and now I'm much more sensitive to people that are living like sharks because I just
Hmm.
that ultimately leads um, to less peace. I guess I would say.
Yeah.
That there's no reason not to have more peace, and like we can figure this out together to have it doesn't need to be as much bad things in the world as there is.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
agree for sure.
yeah, well, thank you for coming on, and I hope we can do this again, especially when there's new news about things, and I'd love to
For
talk.
sure.
I have to break these up into so long, and I'm just getting started, but yeah, I really enjoyed our talk, and I really enjoyed how open you are with me, and how educated you are and how willing to be uneducated you are, how willing to be curious you are. Yeah, because that's how I am. I'm very curious, but it doesn't mean I'm sticking to anything. I'm very open.
Yeah.
I have my beliefs and I'll protect those, but I'm very open-minded too. So
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. This has been
yeah,
fun.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'll get a hold of you hopefully before too long, and we can set something up again.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And I'll put all your, do you have any socials or anything you're trying to do?
Not really. I'm on Twitter and Facebook.
Okay, I'll put your
Yeah.
Twitter on the in the description. Anything?
Sounds good.
All
Great
right.
to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Okay. Take care.
Yeah. Um,